Tiny Habits, The Small Changes That Change Everything, by B.J. Fogg, Ph.D. Introduction. Linda planted her first tiny seed of a new habit in the middle of a hurricane. Not a real hurricane, but one of those life storms that feels like it could tear everything you love right out of the ground. Over the course of just a few years, her son died from a drug overdose. Her daughter was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. The family business was collapsing. And then, in the middle of all that chaos, she discovered her husband had been living with early-onset Alzheimer's. The illness had clouded his judgment, and bad business decisions had pushed them toward bankruptcy. They lost everything. Their savings, their house, even the horse ranch that had been Linda's dream. She was grief-stricken, but she had no time to grieve. Every morning, she would find herself sitting on the edge of her bed, praying for the strength to just get up, to just put her feet on the floor. Hope felt like a distant memory. And then, a tiny habit came into her life. It was a single, simple idea. A pivotal behavior that, she says, literally saved my life. Every morning, after she woke up, she would put her feet on the floor and say 7 words out loud. It's going to be a great day. That's it. A habit that takes about 3 seconds. But for Linda, it was a fulcrum. A tiny seed of positivity she planted in the cracks of her broken life. And it began to grow. What if I told you that the entire secret to changing your life, to losing the weight, building the business, writing the book, or simply finding a little more peace, isn't found in massive, heroic effort? What if it's not about willpower, or motivation, or going big or going home? What if the secret is found in something so small, it seems almost ridiculous? By the end of our time together today, you will understand the simple, science-backed system for making change feel easy, natural, and even fun. You will learn how to plant your own tiny seeds and watch them grow into a life you never thought possible. This is the promise of Tiny Habits, a groundbreaking book by the Stanford behavior scientist, Drive. B.J. Fogg. For over 20 years, Drive. Fogg has been decoding the secrets of human behavior, personally coaching more than 40,000 people and founding the Behavior Design Lab at Stanford University. He's discovered something profound: we've been approaching change all wrong. And he's here to tell us, it's not our fault. So, let's begin our journey and uncover the small changes that can change everything. Book summary. For as long as any of us can remember, we've been told the same story about change. It's a story about strength, about discipline, about pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. If you want to lose weight, exercise more, or be more productive, you just need more willpower. You need to get motivated. And if you fail, which most of us do, the story tells us there's something wrong with us. We weren't strong enough. We lacked character. Shame on us. Drive. B.J. Fogg is here to tear that story down. He argues that this entire approach is a design flaw, not a personal flaw. The problem isn't you, it's your method. For years, we've been trying to assemble furniture with faulty instructions and missing parts, and then blaming ourselves when it collapses. The truth is, motivation is unreliable. It's like a party animal friend, great for a big night out, but you wouldn't count on them to pick you up from the airport. It comes in waves. You might feel a huge surge of motivation on January 1st to overhaul your entire life, but by January 15th, that wave has crashed, leaving you stranded on the beach of your old habits. Fogg calls this the motivation wave, and relying on it is a recipe for failure. So if motivation isn't the answer, what is? After a decade of research, in 2007, Fogg had a breakthrough. He discovered the universal key that unlocks all human behavior, from checking your phone to running a marathon. It's a simple, elegant formula: Bahamian dollar equals map dollar. Behavior happens when three things converge at the same moment: motivation, ability, and a prompt. Think about it. Motivation is your desire to do the behavior. Ability is your capacity to do it, how easy or hard it is. And a prompt is the cue, the trigger that says, do it now. If any one of these three is missing, the behavior will not happen. Period. Fogg illustrates this with a simple story. He was at the gym one day when he got a text message from the Red Cross asking for a donation to help earthquake victims in Haiti. Let's break that down with Bahamian dollar equals map dollar. His motivation was high. He wanted to help the victims. His ability was high. Replying to a text message was incredibly easy to do. And the text itself was the prompt. Because M, A, and P all came together, he donated right there on the elliptical. But what if the Red Cross had called and asked for his credit card number? His wallet was in the car. His ability would have been low, and he probably wouldn't have donated. What if they had sent a letter he mistook for junk mail? There would be no prompt, and no behavior. This model is the key. It shows us that to make a behavior happen, we don't have to rely on the fickle nature of motivation. We have two other powerful levers we can pull. We can adjust the prompt, and most importantly, we can adjust the ability. And this brings us to the very heart of the tiny habits method. The single most powerful way to change your behavior is to make it simpler. Fogg's core mantra is this: simplicity changes behavior. Instead of trying to pump up your motivation, which is exhausting and unreliable, the secret is to make the behavior so easy, so tiny, that you don't need much motivation. This is a complete reversal of how we normally operate. We tend to go big. We decide to meditate for 30 minutes a day, work out for an hour, or write 1,000 words. But when our motivation inevitably dips, these big habits feel like climbing a mountain, and we give up. Fogg's own journey with this idea is both humbling and profound. For years, this brilliant behavior scientist couldn't get himself to floss his teeth regularly. He'd feel motivated after a dental visit, but it never stuck. One day, sitting in the dentist's chair, he asked himself the breakthrough question: how can I make this behavior easier to do? The answer he came up with was so small, it was almost laughable. He decided to floss just one tooth. Seriously. Just one. After he brushed his teeth, he would commit to flossing one single tooth. It was so tiny he couldn't say no. It took no time, no real effort. His ability was sky high. And for the first few days, that's all he did. But a funny thing happened. Once you have the floss in your hand and you've done one tooth, it's pretty easy to do another. And another. He made a rule for himself: flossing more than one tooth was just extra credit. Within about 2 weeks, he was flossing all his teeth, twice a day, a habit that has stuck with him ever since. This story reveals the two ways to make any habit tiny. The first is what Fogg did: scaling back. You take the habit you want, like flossing all your teeth, and you shrink it down to its smallest possible version. Want to meditate for 20 minutes? Your tiny habit is to meditate for 3 breaths. Want to do 50 push-ups? Your tiny habit is to do 2 push-ups against a wall. The second method is called the starter step. This is where your tiny habit is just the very first step of a larger routine. If you want to go for a 3-mile walk every day, your starter step is simply to put on your walking shoes. That's it. You don't have to walk. You just have to put on your shoes. But once your shoes are on, the perception of the task changes. Most days, you'll find yourself heading out the door. This approach is a form of mental jujitsu. It bypasses resistance by keeping the bar ridiculously low. You ensure that you are always capable of doing the habit, no matter how tired, busy, or unmotivated you feel. By keeping the bar low, you keep the habit alive. So we have our tiny behavior. But when do we do it? This brings us to the P in Bahamian dollar equals map dollar, the prompt. Fogg realized that the most powerful prompts are not alarms, sticky notes, or notifications on our phones. Those are what he calls context prompts, and our lives are already cluttered with them. We become desensitized and start tuning them out. The real magic lies in what he calls an action prompt, a name he later refined to something more memorable, an anchor. An anchor is an existing, solid routine in your life that you can attach your new tiny habit to. The key is the word after. You don't just decide to do 2 push-ups at some random time. You create a recipe. After I flush the toilet, I will do 2 push-ups. Flushing the toilet is the anchor. It's a behavior that's already firmly rooted in your day. The new tiny habit, the push-ups, is now anchored to it. This is the anatomy of a tiny habit. After I anchor, I will tiny behavior. Examples are everywhere. After I pour my morning coffee, I will open my journal. After I put my head on the pillow, I will think of one thing I'm grateful for. After I walk in the door from work, I will hang up my keys. The key is to find a good anchor. It needs to match the new habit in 3 ways: location, they happen in the same place; frequency, they happen at the same rate; and theme, they feel connected. You wouldn't anchor sweeping the garage to brushing your teeth. The location and theme are a total mismatch. But anchoring flossing one tooth to brushing my teeth is a perfect fit. So we have the anchor and the tiny behavior. We have a complete recipe for action. But there's one final component. And according to Fogg, it's the most important skill of all. It's the secret ingredient that makes habits form at lightning speed. It's called celebration. Fogg's research led him to a groundbreaking conclusion. Emotions create habits. It's not repetition. It's not frequency. It's the feeling you have right after you perform a behavior that wires it into your brain. When you perform a behavior and immediately feel a positive emotion, your brain releases a chemical called dopamine. This dopamine rush tells your brain, "Hey, that was good. Remember what you just did and do it again." This process encodes the behavior, making it more automatic in the future. This is why some habits form instantly. The first time a teenager gets a text from someone they like, the immediate positive feeling wires in the habit of checking their phone. Number 21 day repetition needed. The good news is, we can hack this system. We can intentionally create a positive feeling on demand, right after our tiny habit, to speed up the wiring process. This is what Fogg calls celebration. His own discovery of this was born from a period of intense personal pain. A business he started was failing, and his young nephew had died tragically. He was anxious, barely sleeping, and dreaded looking in the mirror each morning. One day, after another terrible night, he performed his tiny habit of flossing one tooth. In that moment of despair, he looked at himself in the mirror, gave a small smile, and said one word out loud: victory. And then he felt it. A warm space opened up in his chest. A tiny spark of success. He felt good. And that good feeling was so powerful, he wanted to feel it again. A celebration isn't a reward you give yourself later, like a massage at the end of the week. That's an incentive, and it's too far removed from the behavior to have any effect on habit formation. A celebration must be immediate, happening during or milliseconds after the behavior, and it must be intense enough to feel genuine. It doesn't have to be a big, loud victory. It can be a simple fist pump, a quiet awesome, in your head, a little dance, or just a genuine smile. The only rule is that it has to make you feel successful. Fogg has even coined a word for this specific feeling of success: shine. When you perform your tiny habit recipe, anchor, then behavior, and immediately celebrate, you create shine. That feeling of shine is what tells your brain to make the habit permanent. This leads to Fogg's second great maxim: help people feel successful. When you put all these pieces together, the tiny behavior, the anchor, and the celebration, something magical starts to happen. Your habits begin to grow. This growth happens in two ways. Some habits grow bigger. Your 2 push-ups naturally become 3, then 5, then 10. Your 3 breaths of meditation become a minute, then 5 minutes. You do more when you want to do more, not because you have to. Other habits multiply. Your Maui habit in the morning, "It's going to be a great day," creates a positive feeling that inspires you to make your bed, which then inspires you to tidy the kitchen before you leave. Like seeds on the wind, one good habit plants others throughout your day. This is how tiny leads to transformative. It's not just about the habits themselves, it's about the identity that emerges. When you start succeeding, even in tiny ways, your brain starts to let go of old, negative stories. You stop thinking, "I'm the kind of person who can't stick to an exercise routine." After a week of doing 2 push-ups every day and celebrating, you start to think, "Hey, I'm the kind of person who exercises daily." This identity shift is the ultimate change booster. You start to act in ways that are consistent with your new identity, and entire constellations of new, positive behaviors fall into place naturally. This same system can be used to untangle the habits you don't want. Fogg advises against the idea of breaking a bad habit, which implies a single act of force. Instead, he compares it to untangling a rope full of knots. You don't yank on the whole thing. You find one small, easy knot and gently work it loose. You do this by using the Bahamian $=map$ formula in reverse. To stop a behavior, you can remove the prompt, make it harder to do, decrease ability, or reduce the motivation. The most effective place to start is by removing the prompt. To stop mindlessly scrolling on your phone in bed, don't leave your phone by your bed. Charge it in the kitchen. You've removed the prompt and made the behavior harder to do. This entire framework isn't just for individuals. It's about how we change together. Mike, a successful executive, was at his wit's end with his 21-year-old son, Chris, who was living at home and struggling with basic responsibilities. One daily point of friction was the fancy coffee maker. Chris would use it but never clean the filter, leaving a mess for Mike to find every morning. Nagging? Threatening? Nothing worked. After learning behavior design, Mike tried a new approach. He stopped nagging and instead made the behavior tiny. He asked Chris, "Hey, next time you use the coffee maker, could you just take the filter out and put it on the counter? That's it." Chris agreed. The next morning, the filter was on the counter. Instead of criticizing, Mike celebrated his son's success. "Hey, Chris, thanks for putting the filter on the counter. That means a lot to me." Chris kept doing it. After a couple of weeks, Mike asked him to rinse it first. Soon, Chris was removing, rinsing, and replacing the filter without being asked. That tiny success with a coffee filter changed everything. It replaced a cycle of resentment with a cycle of success and appreciation. Mike and his wife started applying this make-it-tiny approach to everything, and their relationship with their son began to heal. They were finally changing together. Commentary. When you step back and look at the body of work that is Tiny Habits, you realize it's more than just a book about productivity or self-improvement. It's a quiet revolution against the culture of hustle and shame. It's a system rooted in a deep sense of compassion for the human condition. The most profound and enduring lesson from Drive. Fogg's work is a single, powerful idea. You change best by feeling good, not by feeling bad. For generations, we've been taught that change requires a kind of self-flagellation. We beat ourselves up when we fail, believing that shame is a motivator. But Fogg's research proves the opposite. Negative emotions might spur a short-term action, but they shrink the roots of our habits. They make us want to avoid the behavior altogether. It's the positive emotions, the feeling of success, of shine, that fertilize the soil and allow new habits to grow strong. This is why the concept of celebration is so revolutionary. It's not just a cute trick, it's a direct application of neuroscience. It reframes change from a chore you have to endure into a game you get to win, over and over again, every single day. The feeling of success becomes the engine of your transformation. The other stroke of genius in this book is the relentless focus on ability over motivation. The go big or go home myth has caused so much unnecessary failure. By making behaviors tiny, Fogg gives us a way to design for our worst days, not just our best. A tiny habit is something you can do even when you're sick, exhausted, and completely unmotivated. And by doing it, you keep the flame alive. You maintain consistency, which is the true bedrock of any long-term change. So how can you put this into practice today? Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now. I want to leave you with 3 tiny habits you can start immediately. First, the Maui habit. Fogg suggests this as a perfect starting point for anyone. The recipe is simple. After I put my feet on the floor in the morning, I will say, "It's going to be a great day." Try to feel a sense of optimism as you say it. It takes 3 seconds, and it sets a positive trajectory for your entire day. Second, the classic flossing habit. After I brush my teeth, I will floss 1 tooth. Then, immediately celebrate. Give yourself a mental high five. Smile in the mirror. Feel that tiny rush of success. Watch how quickly 1 tooth turns into all of them. And third, try a celebration blitz. If you're feeling overwhelmed or need a quick win, do this. Find the messiest corner of your room, set a timer for just 3 minutes, and tidy up. After every single item you put away, every piece of paper you throw out, every book you put back on the shelf, celebrate. It can be a tiny yes, or a fist pump. When the timer goes off, stop and notice how you feel. I guarantee you'll feel a sense of accomplishment, a feeling of shine. In the end, Tiny Habits teaches us that transformation doesn't come from a lightning bolt of inspiration or a heroic act of will. It comes from the quiet, consistent accumulation of tiny victories. It's about learning to be your own best coach, not your own worst critic. It's about discovering that the path to the person you want to become is paved not with struggle, but with success. That was a summary of Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. We've touched on the most important ideas today, but I have to be honest with you. A summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful city. It shows you the layout, the major landmarks, but it can't give you the feeling of walking the streets, hearing the sounds, or smelling the food. The real magic of this book is in the stories, the detailed examples, and the way Fogg's gentle, encouraging voice guides you through the process. This summary is your map. If anything we've discussed has sparked your curiosity or given you a glimmer of hope, I encourage you to visit the city for yourself. Grab a copy of the book. Reading it isn't just about learning a method, it's about experiencing a shift in how you see yourself and your potential for change. You'll find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please show your support by liking this summary and subscribing to the channel. It's a small click, but it helps us continue to bring you the best ideas from the world's most transformative books. Let's keep learning and growing together.